Well, welcome everyone to today's webinar on the AP Automation Readiness Survey results. This is Brian from Strategic Treasurer, and we're pleased you could join us as we evaluate the survey results and discuss the implications for your organization. Our speakers for today are Steve Gaida, Payments Leader in Product Management and Consulting at Deluxe, and Craig Jeffrey, Founder and Managing Partner of Strategic Treasurer. Welcome, Steve and Craig, and I'll now turn the presentation over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate the introduction. It's good to present with you, Steve. Thanks for collaborating on this.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited.
And everyone, welcome. Thanks so much for taking part of your day. This is a 30-minute webinar. It is quick. We want to cover a lot of information. We don't want it to feel like a full-on sprint, but we will cover information fairly quickly. So thank you for coming. Let me cover what we're going to go over, our agenda for today. So disbursements, where it hurts. This is going to be a section where we talk about some of the key findings about desire for companies to decrease the manual activities, the threat of fraud and solving for that, as well as changing payment types and integration needs. On the automation side, this is the desire for greater automation. A correlation here is that the bigger the company, the more automated they are. And before you just think that that seems obvious, I do want you to reflect on the data in light of larger companies oftentimes have more systems. They're in more countries, and they have a greater level of complexity. And so they're solving these problems at a greater level than small firms in many ways. On the AP efficiency side, there's three things we'll touch on. One is the move from paper to electronic, or paper to more efficient processes. We'll also look at account validation services, validating who we're making payments to. And then finally, one of the areas that will show up cleanly in the results report is that there's integration or integrated files matters to many companies. And then the key takeaway section, Steve and I will cover three key findings. So with that, we'll move into the survey overview. I'll cover that as well. And the quick survey results, we ran the survey as a briefer survey, ran it for 28 days. There's only 18 questions, which is like the simplest survey we've ever done. It's our first year of research. We're super excited and glad that Deluxe participated. And you can see the breakouts in size, a good distribution of companies across the small, middle market, and certainly good representation from the large side, about 120 respondents. So if we continue, I want to break something out for you in terms of sharing how we're grouping the information. You'll see it today. For those of you who are used to our research, we oftentimes have two breakouts. And you can see that in the small category, that's under $1 billion in revenue, and the large category, that's over $1 billion. Through our arrangement with Deluxe, we also are providing, in many cases, the under 50 million, so very small organizations, to mid-market, which we're classifying here as 50 million to 1 billion. And so for those of you who are used to it, if we show mid-market under 50, those two combined equal the small market. So just be used to that. That's a difference and a bit of a change. So with the overview of our agenda, background on the survey, and thanks extended to everyone who took the survey, we'll get into the content. And Steve, I'll be tapping you quickly on this. So this is about pain points. I'd like you to address where are the biggest pain points happening in organizations, and do you see any significant distinctions based on size or any other firmographic elements, Steve?
Yeah, definitely. First, no big surprises in terms of like reducing manual processes, right? When you look to the left, you can see no matter the size of the business, these manual processes are really like the death by 1,000 cuts that are killing AP teams, soaking up all their time. When it comes to AP teams, they're really stuck in a catch-22. In order to digitize and really get a significant portion of your payments out of the mail, traveling digitally, you often have to offer a variety of payment options so they can pick what works best for them. Not all vendors want the same payment type. However, the catch-22 is really that in order to push out a bunch of different payment options, that's more manual processes for your AP team to take on. Instead of the work to produce, let's say, like simple checks and ACH files, now they have more manual processes to push out 5 or 6 different payment types. Again, pushing the payment is half of the job, reconciling is the other half. If you're reconciling from 5 or 6 sources, just another one of those manual processes that just eats them up. So, when you're thinking about freeing your team up from manual processes, make sure you're not actually increasing their process load in order to push out a bunch of additional types of payments. In terms of fraud, no surprises here that it's so high. We'll go deeper into this one a little bit later. But interestingly, our larger businesses that we surveyed are more worried about this than the businesses under 50 million in revenue. Automation, AI, great tools. Good guys can use those tools to make AP teams less of a toil and more efficient. However, they're also incredible tools in the hands of fraudsters. And they're also using these tools to have a bigger reach, increase the odds that they can make more and more attempts. I'm a big baseball guy, and you can get more hits at becoming a better hitter, but you can really increase your number of hits by increasing your number of at bats by 10 or 100 times. And these AI tools are really helping fraudsters become more efficient, get a bigger reach. So they tend to go after big guys a lot, right? You'll start to see them creep into smaller businesses than they have before. Lastly, checks stolen from the mail has always been the biggest and most popular form of fraud. BEC, business email compromise, where a bad actor is posing as a vendor. They're requesting a payment to be sent to a new routing and account number, fastest type of fraud. So, fraud and manual processes really go hand in hand, because when a vendor is requesting to change their payment preference, your AP team now has a manual process to go through. They're typically needing to call the brick and mortar, confirm that the change is real. From a fraud insulation perspective, we hear from clients over and over and over again that this isn't our strong suit. Maybe we should think about outsourcing that risk.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. A couple of things I want to point out, just since this is the first slide with a lot of the breakout. The green on the left is all respondents together. We did 3 categories on the right. And if you observe the reducing manual processes, as Steve had mentioned, there's this general upscale, a little bit, the larger, a little bit more companies relate to that. So that's an upwards trend from small to large. Then we have a downwards trend at the bottom, managing new payment rails, formats, and compliance requirements, right? Bigger the company, they might be able to do that more readily. And that's what we oftentimes see. They're either even, upward, or downward. Sometimes we get a V, or we get a caret sign, like a peak at the middle. So if you look at sending payment and payment explanation remittance information as one payment transaction, there's a bit of a peak there in the mid-market. And this is a call out for that breakout group for mid-market. Why is that higher? The survey doesn't say exactly why that's higher. Why could that be higher? Very small firms are probably dealing with a single system. They have limited elements that they have to change. Large organizations may have more resources. The middle size market, middle-sized companies, mid-market companies usually have a fair bit of complexity in multiple systems, may not be able to get that or accomplish that with every single system. So that's where this additional call-out information helps. So this is where the mid-market peaks. Other ones, it's the small, or so other times it's the larger. So a lot of the data to go through. So thanks so much for your comments on that, Steve. And everyone, we are at our first poll question slide. We have 2 poll question slides, 3 poll questions, I believe. The first one is a single choice. Has your organization automated payment disbursements? Yes, it's complete for all areas. Yes, for some. When the process automating, no, and unsure. So we'll let each of you answer that by selecting the circle and hitting submit. And I will point, after you've done that, I point your attention to the webinar chat box. And please go ahead and follow Deluxe on LinkedIn and Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Our marketing people love it when you do that. And if we get 75 people, I see somebody's already typing Deluxe, 75 people typing the word Deluxe in the chat box, we'll send the results of these poll questions out with the deck afterwards. So, and Brian, you have to count all these Deluxes up. Polls will count too. But here we have the results. Steve, some areas, almost half, all areas, 16%, no, and we're in the process, 23%. So, any initial thoughts on this?
I mean, you'll see you have a great following, and your customers probably tend to be a little bit more leading edge than what's out there. So that's one thing that you're probably seeing. Your audience is a little bit ahead of the curve. But still a lot of customers that are struggling to figure it out and find a way forward.
Yeah, that's great. It's like who's going to come to an AP Automation Readiness Survey? Those who might be focused on it a little bit more. So that's all good. Thanks everybody for answering the poll question. And that brings us to the first slide following the first poll question, which is where are we with automated disbursements? What's your current position? This is asking the same question that we just did in the poll for the general audience. And Steve, I don't know if you had any comments on this.
Yeah, I think for time purposes, just take a glance, roughly 10% as compared to the audience here in our survey. It says that they're complete, right? So we've got more superstars here than what we saw in the poll. Half has done some, automation. 18% are on the path. They've seen the light, and 17% are not interested. They think it's a passing fad, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that contrast with the audience. That's helpful for everybody listening in to see who's here, how they're responding, how that compares to the general population from the survey. So on the barriers to payment automation, what's most significant? Again, on the right-hand side, we've got it broken out by mid-market, small, and large. Purple is the whole category. Mid-market is a component of that. So we put small right up against large, and then we've spiked out mid-market on the left-hand side. That's the entire corpus of respondents. Steve, your thoughts?
Yeah, I could literally, through all my conversations over the years, I could spend hours here. But IT time is expensive and it's precious because you just have a finite amount of it. A lot of times in the planning process, executives are looking at those IT resources really closely, and it's almost framed as like, do we use IT? Do we use those resources to build thing A that's going to make life better for our customers that are paying us, and we're going to generate more revenue and that sort of thing? They'll often throw out big business cases with big revenue attached to it that never seems to quite hit, right? Or should we spend those limited resources on AP automation processes that are going to be better for our AP team, our finance team, our vendors, right? How to win those, limited IT resource conversations and become the priority on the roadmap is probably a topic for another day. But I do believe that a key takeaway is giving your executive team options, because many times they're going to pick those customer projects where they can sell more stuff and get more revenue. Front to back, touchless payments, automation, all the way through. That's the dream. But attached to that dream is often a big budget, lots of IT, project management resources to bring it to life. So you have to bring other solutions to the table as well. Looking at the most painful parts of your process, working with a vendor that specializes in one of those particular areas. At Deluxe, we're more focused on the end of that process, kind of snapping on payments to the end of your process. How do you send the payments? How do you get your payments out of the mail without having to do a bunch of collection exercises? There's other vendors that are focused on invoice capture, approvals, three-way matching. The point is, you can find partners that are focused on solving parts of the problem that you're really looking to go after, because you're not overhauling the process. You need much less from a dev perspective, and you can make real changes to your AP operation without eating the whole apple in one bite. If you ask for the moon from a resource perspective, and you try to do full end-to-end automated payments, but never seem to secure that big IT budget, maybe a better approach next time is to give them a second choice and sort of say, okay, if we're not really going to go after it, let's go after the piece of the problem that's causing the team the most headache, right? In terms of number two, system limitations and restrictions, my advice here is really be practical. You all have someone on your team that's super detailed and catches everything. Candidly, these people are great resources to have. However, when you're meeting with providers, they can also come up with, fringe use cases and things that don't happen super often. A new solution won't typically solve every single problem that you've ever had and can think of. But be realistic and, ask, even though it doesn't solve every single thing, and maybe we have a few new limitations that come along with it, would our AP team be in a better place if this solves 15 of our 20 biggest problems? So, instead find a solution for a problem that really fits you. And again, if you want that perfect thing that fits and fixes every problem, that's likely more of a customized product that has a bigger price attached to it, with more IT and project management resources and that sort of thing. But yeah, for purposes of time, I won't literally spend an hour here, Craig.
Thanks for the by eating the apple by bites versus the whole thing was particularly helpful. One number call out here just for everybody to pay attention to, because this chart is new. On the right-hand side, we look at system limitations or restrictions. Purple is small and large is blue. And the average is about 49%. So it's roughly in the middle between these two. And if you look at orange, I just want you to know that that's a subcomponent of the 57%. And what this means is that because mid-market plus the under 50 average out to 57%, you can see this is where there's that carrot, where there's a greater issue on system limitations or restrictions. So that's another area of change and challenge for organizations that have quite a bit of complexity, but nowhere near the resources that large firms have. So that's a challenge in the mid-market space. And that's where this data, asking a lot of questions, pulling out a lot of firmographic information allows us to gain some insights, make some hypotheses about that. Now, we're on our second and final page for poll questions. There are two questions embedded in what's on your screen or hiding behind another area of your screen. Both of them, the first question is single choice. The second question is multiple choice. You can submit both of them after you've answered and hit the submit button. We need 25 more deluxes in the chat box. So after you've answered those, please feel free to go ahead and plug those in. And then we'll have another commercial announcement on the chat box about social media or something like that. It'll be very good. So how likely are you to add payment automation solution? Select one in 2025. What's your plans this year? And what's the largest security concerns? What are they for concerns and issues faced with supplier payments? Which ones are significant? What are the large ones? So all that apply for that one. Right. So we finish up, that'll be great. Steve, I'll let you take a look at the second question. I'll take a response at the first one. So very likely and considering, we're at 51%. half of the audience. This is great news for companies like Deluxe, who are helping companies transform how they handle payments across the board. Steve, any thoughts on the security concerns?
No, nothing really jumps out.
Yeah, I'll just say the account validation about changing payment information. That was a really big topic for insurance companies maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 4 years ago. They were all fixing it. And now across the board, that's become important. That surprised me how much that has come on in the past year as an issue. So fun stuff. Thanks everybody for responding. We have enough responses, and there's also in the chat box the following Deluxe or Strategic Treasurer. On the vendor payment side, Steve, the question is about account validation. So thank you everybody for answering, making that the largest response. Account validation causes the most unease, right? That's where criminals have been taking advantage of companies heavily. I'd just love to hear your thoughts on fraud generally or on that topic specifically.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of like validating a payment change or adding a new customer, really one of the biggest concerns, and I believe part of it is because it's so manual. Most AP teams have processes in place. When a vendor is changing a payment destination, you're calling their brick and mortar, confirming that change, that this is your actual client. It's one of your controls, right? This is where I'm hearing AI used more and more often. AI can write and send a customized email that looks like it's from your vendor. That email explains that something has changed. And some will even say, hey, I've experienced fraud, and that's why I need to change my payment preference, and where my payment's essentially going. AI can also query and look up the name of your CFO and bring that into the email, story, phone call that they make to make it more believable. I'm not super technical, and I've programmed AI applications to have real life conversations. And it's amazing what you can do in a short amount of time. AI will make the phone call. AI will have the conversation. They'll say something like, hey, this is Steve from ABC Company's AR team. We sent you guys an email too, but we had some problems with fraud and we needed to change banks. I can give you the new routing and account number to confirm that it's what's in the email. My CFO talked to Bob, using your CFO's name. And again, they told us we not only needed to email the new routing and account number, but also call to verify. So, your AP team knows that they still, as a part of their process, need to make an outgoing call to confirm that payment change. But if your AP person has a stack of things to get through today, and they get that call or even that voicemail from AI, it's just a matter of time until you're going to lose. Some AP clerk, again, they're able to be more efficient and get more at bats. Some AP clerk is going to use that voicemail or incoming call from AI, and they're going to use that as a substitute to making that outbound verification call. And as you know, once it happens, your funds are lost. As an aside, fraudsters are so smart. To use fraud as part of their story to defraud you is just next level evil. But the real question again is, it's not just a fraud concern, but it's a manual process concern too. And how are you really validating that new routing and account number and figuring out, does it actually belong to ABC Company? Most businesses will have the protocol in place where you're calling the brick and mortar, trying to kind of tie the request to their actual location. The problem is, it takes a ton of time. It's another manual process. And it's also very susceptible to internal fraud as well. I spoke with a customer that had a policy where they're calling to confirm routing and account number before the payment's sent. The AP rep, they know the documentation process that they need to go through to, document that outbound call. And they did everything to make it look perfect. So it looked like a good validation, but in reality, that new account where the funds went to had nothing to do with the vendor. and their AP rep really knew that that validation process was manual and really outside of their system, and they were able to fake it. So, my advice here is if you want to get some good sleep at night without worrying, work with a partner that knows payments and does those validations for you. They've got the technology. They can ping a new account that you're thinking of updating and tell you if that account actually belongs to ABC Company or if it belongs to Frank the Fraudster. They can do it much more efficiently. If your business isn't, masters at info security, rely on someone who is. Outsource that. If you don't, it's only a matter of time till you suffer a loss, and it can be really painful. The other thing that jumps out at me again, check fraud by mail isn't as top of mind. AFP does a fraud and payment survey every year, and checks getting stolen from the mail, number one form of payment, decade after decade. A good insurance agent's going to sort of protect you from the thing that most likely to impact you. So get your checks out of the mail whenever possible. Yes, it's nice to be able to educate your teams on fraud, spoofing techniques, deep fakes, but it's impossible to stay ahead of everything. By the time your team learns of something, they've moved on to the next thing. I'm not being a pessimist. I'm just saying it's very, very hard to stay in front of that. And then, lastly, AP teams are busy. So, doing everything that you can to make their life easier is really, truly important, because as they're stressed and as they're busy, that's where corners get caught. And that's really where the bad guys are able to trick you and get some of your money.
Great, thanks. So just one more slide for people to look at on their own. We'll send this to you. Talks about where is the efficiency. Moving to electronic over paper is viewed as the most efficient. You can see some of those breakouts. We'll send those to you. And now with our abbreviated version, I'll start. Maybe you can cover the last two, Steve. Disbursements, this move towards automated disbursements, move towards digital is key. The improved payment speed and security are very much top of mind for the vast majority of all of your peers. Steve?
Yeah, I'll just hit a couple of points for time here, but really, increasing speed and accuracy is huge, right? More manual processes that you have, the more mistakes that you're going to make. Also, in terms of taking a smaller bite of the apple or going for the whole thing, just know that there are vendors that are there that can help you with specific pieces of it to make it a lot easier for you. So if you're swinging for the fences and you don't get that big budget, don't give up. Give them another option. When you're thinking about moving to electronic payments from an efficiency perspective, there's 2 points that I really want to make in closing. Make sure you understand how your provider is going to digitize the payment, and how do they handle vendors that don't want to share data. Okay. If their answer is, don't worry, we send a paper check into the mail to those people that don't want to share their data to get paid digitally, you're still going to be sending a paper check in the mail to them 10 years from now, right? Lastly, think about your vendors. What's going to make them happy? If your new solution forces a V card or credit card payment, that's great for the vendors that like credit cards. However, when you're paying large invoices, 100,000 invoice, and that vendor is going to lose 2 to 3%, and they're really feeling strong-armed into taking that payment, you're going to get angry calls from vendors. You have to factor that into your calculus as well. Look for partners that care about the payee experience. Look for partners that allow your vendor to choose what's best for them, because when they are, they're happier. When they're happier, they're taking better care of you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Brian has a few quick announcements and a resource available to share. So, Brian.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. The CTP credits, today's webinar slides, and a recording of today's webinar will be sent to you within 5 business days. And be sure to download the AP Automation Readiness Survey report by clicking the link in the chat box. Thank you, and we hope you have a good rest of the day.